do you want me to do?
Oh, Leonard.
I don't know. I've tried every way I know how to let you know how sorry I am, Dad. You act like you don't care, like you don't want me around anymore.
Oh, Leonard, that's ridiculous.
You don't, do you?
Leonard.
Dad, you don't have to give me any more one-word answers. Well, I'm leaving. You'll have to have me around as a constant reminder of what happened to you.
Oh, wait a minute, son.
This is Talkback. Our drama for this program is called The Appraisal. Our guest is Dr. James Armstrong, minister of Broadway Methodist Church, Indianapolis, Indiana. Later, Miss Lisa Sergio and Mr. Merle Emery will be asking Dr. Armstrong questions raised by our play.
$50. Would you say that's about right?
Doesn't matter too much.
Well, it does to me, Mr. Morris. I've got to put a price on these things.
$50 is all right.
You handle that piece as if it was worth a lot more.
It is.
But I thought you said
Mr. Walters, my mother gave me these sheets here. Oh, hi, Dad. I didn't know you were here.
Yes, I'm here. Where did you think I'd be?
Well, I meant I didn't hear you come in.
My son means he didn't hear the sound of the automobile. We no longer have one.
Well, my mother said you wanted these sheets to cover some of the furniture, Mr. Walters.
Thanks.
Would you do this as quickly as you can?
Would you mind not standing over my shoulder, son? It makes me nervous. But I asked you not to...
How much is the chess set worth?
Hmm?
The chess set. How much is it worth?
Why?
Well, it's my father's. He made it himself. Hand carved every piece. Took him over a year.
Oh. Oh, about 50. $75.
I wish I could buy it back for him.
What happened? Your father's business go bankrupt?
No.
Well, then what went wrong?
I guess it's me, Mr. Walters. I guess I went wrong.
Now, hold it, boy. I haven't listed that item yet.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You don't look like a bad kid.
It's not what those two people think. They're in a hospital now. After 3 months, they're still in a hospital.
What happened?
I ran into their car with ours. It was at night. We didn't have adequate insurance.
Well, that's your father's fault.
No, sir. He told me not to take the car. I did anyway. It was a brand new car, and he was going to put a binder on it in the morning.
And you couldn't wait?
That's the difference. I didn't. It's just a pile of junk now.
Well, you're lucky you're still alive.
Am I?
Well, that's how it goes.
It's going to take everything we own to pay for the damages. The house, the business, everything.
Your father must have given you the devil, huh?
Yeah, At first he did. Now he...
Well, you see, if you've got any more sheets upstairs, this won't be enough.
Okay, I'll get some for you.
Leonard! Lunch! Call your father, dear.
Is it all right if I do the upstairs now, Mrs. Morse?
Oh, yes, of course. But won't you have lunch with us?
What?
I said, won't you have lunch?
Oh, I heard you. I was just surprised, that's all.
At what?
Well, most people don't like to detain me. They'd rather I got out as quickly as possible.
Why?
Now, they blame me for what happened to them. I'm not here because I like doing this. The state sends me. If things have to be auctioned, then there's got to be an appraiser.
I don't blame you. But won't you stay for lunch?
I think I'd better finish up. I'll have a cool drink later on, though, if I may.
I made your favorite dessert.
Thanks, Mom.
The celebration of our last day here?
No, I just thought we ought to leave on a pleasant note. That's how we came in.
The circumstances are quite different.
Oh, I think our new apartment's going to be fine.
I wish I thought so.
So do I. Did you say grace, dear?
Our Heavenly Father, creator of all things good and beautiful and just, we bow our heads before Thee. We thank Thee for all the blessings. The blessings.
Richard.
Dad, what do you want me to do? Will you please just tell me and I'll do it? I'll do anything you want, Dad, anything you ask if I can only make it up to you in some way.
It's all right, Leonard. It just takes some of us longer than others
Longer? How much longer can it take? I haven't slept a night in 3 months. And you're dead. Dad, you haven't even looked at me since it happened. What do you want me to do?
Oh, Leonard.
I don't know. I've tried every way I know how to let you know how sorry I am, Dad. You act like you don't care, like you don't want me around anymore.
Oh, Leonard, that's ridiculous.
You don't, do you?
Leonard.
Dad, you don't have to give me any more one-word answers. I'm leaving. You don't have to have me around as a constant reminder of what happened to you.
Oh, wait a minute, son. I didn't realize. Well, I guess I did, but I just didn't know what to say to him. Ever since the accident, all I can think of is, it's gone. My home, my business, everything I've ever saved for and worked for, it's gone.
Everything?
To start all over again at my age, I just can't see the future.
Richard, don't you see what you're doing to yourself? You're letting this destroy everything that you were, everything that you've believed in all of your life.
They're taking everything I've ever worked for.
That's strange. I always felt that it was for the three of us, you, Leonard, and me, that you worked.
But it was for us.
Oh, it's not that a lovely home and a fine car weren't nice things to have. They were, and I hate giving them up, too. But it never was the source of our happiness.
How do you do it, May? I've tried. I guess I'm just tired.
Richard, there's never been a promise that all of our plans would work out exactly as we wanted them to. But But we do have the assurance that with God's help, we'll be strong enough to face whatever does come. You've always been strong enough. You will now, too. I must go to Leonard.
I wonder if I can have that cool drink your wife promised me.
Why, sure.
I'm sorry it's taken so long, but there was a lot to do. I saw the boy up there in his room. He looks upset.
I suppose you see a lot of that in your business.
Yes. I see lots of everything in my business. I've been auctioning off other people's property for 20 years, Mr. Morse. Thanks. Meet all kinds. It sours you a little bit. There's nothing makes you lose faith more than people.
Oh?
It's amazing what they turn to when they're in trouble. Yogi, fortune-telling, hypnosis, all kinds of things. They even drag out the old rabbit's foot.
The what?
The rabbit's foot. Prayer. All of a sudden, they're scared and they decide to rub up the fur a little.
There's quite a distinction between superstition and prayer, Mr. Walters.
I've seen very few make that distinction. You know what they pray for, Mr. Morse?
No, I don't.
The first thing is for me to get out of the house. Then they pray to have everything they've lost returned to them. It never happens.
Is that what disappoints you, that their prayers aren't answered?
No. I think they're being selfish. I've seen people pray mostly for themselves, when they're in trouble, when they want something. It's an outlet for self-pity. I'd be ashamed to turn to prayer as a last resort.
How about as a first resort?
When I see it, I'll believe it. I've never seen it yet.
I have.
Would you mind signing some papers for me, Mr. Morse?
No, I don't mind.
They're right in here. Now, where did I put them? I know I left them here somewhere.
Look, I'll sign them later. Leonard, may I talk to you?
It's what I've wanted you to do for 3 months.
I couldn't, Leonard. I didn't know how. It's still a little difficult, but...
Mom told me about how you've been worrying, Dad. I didn't want to add to your problems.
You haven't. I'm the one who's been wrong. Look, there's something I'd like to explain to you if I can.
Oh, you don't have to, Dad. Not now.
But I want to. It's important. You see, for the last 3 months, well, like at the table, I've been so obsessed with what we've lost that I've forgotten about what we still have.
It's not very much, is it?
If we still have each other, son, that's all that's really essential.
Dad, what are we going to do?
Well, I don't know. But now that the two of us are going to quit worrying about what's all over and done with and start putting our whole minds to it, we'll come up with something.
Gee. Let's eat, Dad. I'm starved. Mom?
Dr. Armstrong, once again, we're able to talk about the loss of the sense of values. Do you think we can blame this on our present-day society and our way of living?
Certainly, I think it's a result in part of this, but I think it goes beyond this. Wasn't it the appraiser who said there's nothing makes you lose faith more than
Yes.
people? And I think the problem we're facing is fundamentally a human problem. I think, at least I hope, we're outgrowing the naive optimism that some of our fathers had about the inevitable progress of man. Because man has a fundamental problem, which is selfishness. Now, we live in a culture of prosperity. Because of this, we have so many things that others do not have and have not had. And when you relate the problem of human selfishness and pride to our prosperity, you've just compounded the problem, I think.
But wasn't this man, in a way, so devastated by the loss? Because in his feeling, this was what he had given the two people he loved most, his wife and his son. So was it also not a false evaluation of what is really enduring?
Yes, I think so. We say in his feeling, he thought that he had done this for his wife and son. And yet I think he came to realize that perhaps he had not done this for his wife and son at all. There was something almost demonic, if you'll excuse the phrase, about his own involvement in it, because he came to see that his motives were not quite what he had thought they were.
Well, pride, of course. He must have taken great pride in front of his fellow businessmen in demonstrating what he had given them.
Yes, not only this, but he had a lovely home to live in, and this was a status symbol. He doubtless had a very fine car, and this was a status symbol. So all of the pride and perhaps inherent self-centeredness that is a part of our problem, yours and mine, was reflected here in detail.
Why doesn't the church really teach people the difference in values between the status that you're talking about, which he revealed so intensely, and the status of the values of the soul?
I think perhaps in part it is doing this. Certainly it is its responsibility. But there are two things the church is doing now with greater effectiveness, I think, than it did 25 or 30 years ago. One, it has been disenchanted. It no longer thinks that man is quite as good as once it thought he was. And secondly, I think it is taking very seriously in our particular culture the fact that we put our eggs in the wrong basket as a people.
We were amazed at the fact that this father seemed unable to forgive this boy over a period as long as several months, as was mentioned. Do you think this lack of being able to forgive is a part of our loss of a sense of value? Do they go along together?
Very much so, except I'm not certain that forgiveness was central in the problem. I think had he been asked at any given time, he would have said, yes, I have forgiven him. But he was defeated because his thought was not concentrating on his son. It was concentrating on himself. Doubtless he'd gone through the formality of forgiving his son shortly after it happened, because the boy said that his father had been pretty hard on him at first, and then nothing had followed.
But he had not looked at him even.
Yes.
So that
But he was so self-centered.
But is forgiveness an outward thing? Surely not. I mean, the fact that he couldn't bring himself to look at this boy was from the inside.
I think so. It's because his thought was so concentrated on himself that he didn't see the boy. When he looked at him, he wasn't thinking of the boy, wasn't seeing the boy, because these were his losses. This was his defeat.
But then it was not real forgiveness.
No, in fact, the boy probably wasn't involved in it too much at all. He was thinking of himself.
Do you think that perhaps this man didn't really begin to realize what he had done until he actually forgave the boy, or was the actual forgiving a part of what his wife had taught him and what she told him?
Well, I think doubtless the boy had to be recognized as a person in this situation. He was not seen by the father, he was seen by the mother. As the father came to realize the problem he was imposing on the boy because of his own inner tensions, then he was in a position to extend forgiveness. I don't know that you can forgive unless first you've understood.
Because the whole problem of prayer, it seems to me, is a very serious one there. Should one ever pray for anything really except God's help to give us the strength to accept what comes?
Well, I think this is another crux in this matter. It depends upon what we think of prayer. And if prayer is this rabbit's foot to be rubbed in the case of emergency, this is one thing. But if prayer is a way of life, if there is a constancy about it, then when the specific circumstances develop that require the special of attention of the prayer, he is in a position to pray. Long years ago, a little classic was written called The Meaning of Prayer. And one of the chapters was entitled Prayer as Dominant Desire. Now, the father in this said that everything he'd done so that he could have a house, so that he could have a car, so that he could save for you and you and you. Now, this was his dominant desire. Therefore, according to the thesis of this early book on prayer, this was his prayer. He was praying through his life for the things that were important to him, yes.
Well, then, if you are accustomed to prayer, surely you must be thinking of the afterlife as part of your normal process of praying. You are taken away from this life, even as you pray. Therefore, how could you insist on all the temporal values?
Well, if prayer is seen as dominant desire, if it is lifted out of the framework of the mystical, if it is not seen in its purely Christian context, then it simply becomes the thing that I want most in my life, or the thing that you want most in yours. Now, the responsibility, it seems to me, for the Christian and for the church as the agency proclaiming the truth in this regard, it seems to me that the responsibility here rests in the fact that we must make prayer a God-centered experience so that we practice the presence, and so that our life is permeated with those values which are revealed through the Christ, through the New Testament, and through the great traditions of our faith.
You speak of lifting prayer out of the mythical. How in the world do we go about doing this and teaching people to do it?
The word I used was mystical.
Mystical?
Yes, and I don't know that we can ever remove prayer in the Christian sense from its mystical context, because it is communion with the infinite. And who that is finite among us can define the infinite, really?
But we always teach, or if I may say so, you, Dr. Armstrong, who represent the church here, teach us laymen, whether deliberately or otherwise, I don't know, but to pray for this. A person is sick. A mother comes to you, or a father, because a child is sick. I don't know whether you personally, but other members of the clergy would say, well, you must pray and God will save this child. Is this not so?
Sometimes. I would never say this, and most of the brethren I know of in the ministry would not say this, because, again, this is simply the transference of limitation and selfishness into the realm of the Spirit. It seems to me that the lesson we learn in this film, or in this story that we've seen, perhaps above all other lessons that we learn, is the fact that prayer is adjustment to circumstance, so that we are given the power, the strength, the resource to relate to whatever life brings to us. Every one of us has prayed the prayer of Habakkuk, at least if we're sensitive at all and if we've lived it all. How long, O Lord, will this continue? Thou hearest not. Now, every one of us has prayed that prayer. But when we can pray with our Lord in Gethsemane, this is what I want, God. It's what I want more than anything in all the world, but not my will, but thine be done. The reference to something beyond the self, to a greater responsibility. When prayer becomes this, then perhaps we are growing toward maturity in our Christian faith.
I would like to ask you this. In a society in which so much around us is geared to my ability to do, not thy will be done, but my will be done. So much is geared to what we can achieve and control, including space, including the moon. How can you take particularly a younger generation and show them this extraordinary dichotomy? They're almost two completely contrasting values. What we teach at the temporal level as part of a system of democracy, largely Christian, and then what to be a real Christian means, which is, thy will be done. I don't count. I have no power without you.
I don't know of any generation in history that has found a greater helpmate in history than our own to teach this lesson, because we have been a people who have stressed the very things that you have referred to as our temporal value system. We have talked about push and conquest and getting ahead, self-sufficiency, and yet what has this brought us? On the basis of history, in our own time, it's brought us a couple of world wars and a lot of smaller wars. It's brought us the rise of dictators. It has brought us great depressions, and our reaction to those depressions, which were not the reactions of a mature people, It has brought us increasing crime rates. We have our prosperity, and yet you bring out a new book on peace of mind or tranquility of soul, and just like that, it's become a bestseller. We are a neurotic people. We're coming to realize this. We're a disenchanted people. All we need to do is to go to a Broadway play, and we see it reflected in almost every line. We're lost. The rise of existentialism as a philosophy or a way of life is just one more manifestation of this lostness. So apparently, we have the illustrations of our own time and of our own history telling us that the things we have believed in will not suffice, that there must be something beyond ourselves, beyond these values, that we must turn to.
Well then, as a nation, do you think we have waited too long and have turned to prayer now as a last resort, or have we even reached that point?
I think that we may have waited too long as a nation. I don't know that we've turned to prayer. I think if we see prayer as a constant relationship rather than a last resort gimmick, we would have to confess that we have not turned to prayer. It seems to me the challenge of our time then is not to turn to prayer, in quotes, but to develop the relationship between God and man, between man and man. That is a requisite for building the kind of world we must have. It may be too late for that.
Can you ever have such a world where there is no silence, Dr. Armstrong?
Oh, certainly not. Nor can you have this utopian world that the dreamers have dreamed of across the centuries, because even if today, hypothetically, and it won't happen, even if today the perfect world order descended upon us, tomorrow you'd have the birth of a new batch of babies. The whole process would have to start all over.
Yes, but also the physical fact of silence. There is noise everywhere. How can you commune with God or with your own spirit where there is an artificial noise going on?
Well, I would not discount the value of monastic silence, of this kind of retreat that can build up the inner resource. By the same token, I think that one of the things the church must interpret to our time is the fact that God is to be found in noise. God is to be found in strife and conflict, and life as it's lived.
Yes, but not the necessary noises of life. But where, for example, a plane takes off, after the passengers are seated and while the plane is getting ready, music has to come on, which isn't even hearable because there are the noises from the airfield going on and the motor turning.
Music tubed in. And yet,
you see, I think this kills the ability of the soul to talk to itself.
This discussion isn't finished until you have thought through to your satisfaction the questions that Miss Sergio, Mr. Emery, and Dr. Armstrong have been considering. Perhaps you will want to continue to think and talk about the issues which Talkback is raising. Talkback is a public service program presented by this station and the churches of your community. It was produced in cooperation with the National Council of Churches as a contribution of the Methodist Television Ministry.